Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Tonight is a meeting that we've been trying to have over the last few years, a pre-town meeting, which in essence is to give town meeting members the opportunity to ask questions specific to the warrant articles that are going to be before you at the town meeting. So for everyone to just remember that the town meeting is October 18th, and it is at 6 p.m., I believe. Do I have the time right? Yes, 6 p.m. On October 18th. So we did PDF and email to those town meeting members that we have email addresses for. We sent the warrant out on Friday morning. We also mailed it, and you should have received it Saturday at the very latest today. So how we generally run these, we have all the department heads and assistant department heads here at the table that have either sponsored a warrant article this evening or have something on the warrant that may be of interest. We want to make sure that they were here to answer any questions that you may have. So again, this meeting is to go over the warrant for the fall town meeting on October 18th. You have that warrant in your packet. That's the only topic would be the warrant as we've generally gone through this. Sometimes we make comments ahead of time about articles that we know we've been questioned about. This time, there's only one that I would want to just verify, and then I think we also probably want to have Adam Menard, our town planner, just mention the zoning article, because a lot of times we have a zoning article, and there's a lot of questions at town meeting about zoning articles. This is a pretty basic one. This one is required under Mass General Law that we do this, but I'll have Adam explain it when we get there. So to start, I should probably, just in case any of you are not familiar, we have our police chief, Todd Lemon. We have our new deputy police chief, Scott Mills, and our fire chief, Steve Coleman, assistant town manager and CFO, Ed Kazanovich, deputy chief, fire chief, Glenn Johnson, Adam Menard, town planner, DPW director, Joanna Paquin, and assistant DPW director / sewer commissioner, Nick Schwartz. Also here is Cecilia from the school department, the budget director for the school department, in case you have any questions on the school department items as well. Not that she can't sit up here with us, but she's welcome to come up, and if you do have questions on school items, let us know. So I also want to acknowledge one of the members of our Board of Selectmen who's here, Steve Chambers, so thank you for coming. So just to start, 2 articles are going to be amended on the floor by town administration. First one is Article 2, and it is about halfway down Article 2. It is the line item for the fleet mechanic. As you see it on your schedule, on your copies, it is, the wording in it now says, add line item in a certain account, fire department, for a fire mechanic. That is being changed, that is being changed to read same amount, it will be a different account number, and it's going to be the Department of Public Works for a fleet mechanic. It's the same concept, it's just we're redirecting the location of that position. So, and I'll get into that in a minute. Likewise, Article 15 will be amended, and Article 15 will now read the same, the same 2 lines, but when it starts with the word authorize. So, and I do have a couple of extra copies here. If anyone needs the warrant, please let me know. Yeah. Hi, Norm, how are you? Good. Oh, and I should also say that this meeting's being televised. Here you go. Nice to see you. This meeting is being televised by Auburn Cable TV. And do you need, I think I might have given you 2. It's being televised by Auburn Cable TV, so town meeting members that aren't able to attend tonight, if you know of any that mentioned it, this will be available on YouTube.
Yeah, we're streaming it, we're broadcasting live, we're recording it, and we'll play that.
Awesome, so you'll have the opportunity to have your fellow town meeting members look at it if they didn't get a chance. So just to go back, so the Article 15 will now read, authorize the amounts being reduced from $150,000 to $115,000. Authorize $115,000 towards equipment for the Department of Public Works Fleet Maintenance Division. So those are the two changes on the articles, and now I'm going to just briefly explain that to you. We had initially proposed to add a fleet mechanic position to be dedicated to work on fire apparatus. Right now, we have a fleet maintenance division at DPW, and that was really established in 2012, I believe it was, back when we first did the reorganization plan. At that time, we were outsourcing a lot of our work. And we are outsourcing all of our work, actually, for police, for fire, for DPW, school department, any town vehicles, administrative vehicles. It was all being outsourced. We did an analysis back in 2012 and determined that we could do it more efficiently, better, and possibly save money, which we did and do. But the intent wasn't as much to save money as to make sure that we had more responsiveness. So when you have to outsource things, you have no control over the cost, and you have no control over the timing of when those repairs are made. So we felt for efficiency purposes, it made sense to bring that in-house. And it's done great. As a matter of fact, it's done great so well that we have more vehicles to service now, and we just don't have the staffing in place to do that. So there are things that we need to work on that, because of the volume of work, we just can't get to it with the mechanics that we have. So we have a total of 3 at DPW. Since 2012, we've added a number of vehicles, and a number of those vehicles were added because, again, we did analysis. Did it make sense to be paying employees to use their own vehicles for official town business, or did it make more sense to purchase vehicles for the employees to utilize, and therefore we could share resources among departments? So we started to purchase vehicles that could be shared. So those vehicles have increased. I guess, the detail of what needs to go into the maintenance of those vehicles has become very complicated. So, and I think the chief has mentioned to me before, the diesel vehicles need a different type of maintenance than the non-diesel vehicles. Soon, we're going to have to also look at making sure that we have mechanics that can work on electric vehicles, EVs. That's the next, hybrid vehicles. So the fleet has changed, the dynamics of the fleet have changed, and the fleet has increased. So with it have come increased needs to make sure that we can keep up with the work. If we can't keep up with the work, we're back to a situation where we're going to have to outsource the work. And of course, we have excellent employees, very talented employees, but there's only so much work that you can fit into a day. Specifically to this item, we had some concerns with the fire apparatus, and the chief can jump in at any time, but the fire apparatus is very specialized equipment, and that requires a different level of training and a different level of detail than oil changes even on a police vehicle, or an oil change on one of our inspection services vehicles. The fire department vehicles are much more complex. They also require much more preventative maintenance. All of our vehicles should be getting and do get preventative maintenance, but oftentimes the vehicles that are breaking down, when they break down and they're emergency vehicles and they have to be done right away, it pushes off the ability to get to the preventative maintenance, because we've got to focus on getting those vehicles back out on the road, especially in the winter when there's something happens to one of the highway vehicles and we're in the middle of a snowstorm, or something happens to an ambulance or a fire vehicle. That has to take priority. They have to get that back on the road. So all of these led us internally to have a discussion as to what's the best mechanism for addressing this. We want to keep fleet in-house. We don't want to be outsourcing it. There are certain things that we have to outsource still, that we just don't have either the equipment or the skill set to do that. We have to outsource certain things, but for the most part, we try to do it in-house. To do that, we absolutely need one more mechanic. Now, initially, when we put this together, which is why we just are amending this, we thought that the mechanic would work 100% for the fire department and work just on the fire vehicles in the fire department buildings, utilizing the DPW garage if they needed to have anything specific done that couldn't be handled at the fire department. The more we talked about it, and after a finance committee meeting and some discussions with other members of the community who had questions, we regrouped. We sat back down and said, how can we do this so we're still getting the services that we need, how we can maintain our vehicles, we can do the preventative maintenance, and we can have a level of assurances to all of us that we're giving them the resources they need to get the job done. And what we have decided to do is to put, we still need that fleet mechanic. We are going to create another fleet mechanic position at DPW that would be dedicated to fire. That way, that person will get specific training on the fire apparatus that's now required that we get. So if that person is needed for something else at DPW in an emergency, of course, we share resources. We collaborate between departments. But this person's primary responsibility will be day-to-day working on fire apparatus. And likewise, if this person needs assistance, the other plan, which is part of this, would be that the fire department, when they do their next round of hiring, assuming we get all of this approved, they would be hiring a firefighter/mechanic, which would be a person that would be a backup to the fire apparatus fleet maintenance person. So all of that being said, we are all in agreement that this is a good plan, it's a solid plan, it gives us the help that we need, it will allow us to hopefully get back to a regularly scheduled preventative maintenance, because we'll have enough staff to keep up with the emergency work and the preventative work, as opposed to just reacting to the emergency work. Obviously, we know and have always done preventative maintenance, but the level of that preventative maintenance is escalated when it comes to fire equipment. So, Chief, do you want to add anything? or-
No, I think that's a good summary.
Okay, I was waiting for you.
Yeah,
to-
no, good
All
summary.
right. Joanna, anything? So we, again, we've had several meetings on this. We met on this early, I think back in August, we started meeting on it. We put this plan together. We came up with these tweaks on Friday and today, and we're all confident that this is the best approach. This is a critical position. It's critical that we have someone who will be able to go and get the specific certifications or trainings that may be needed on the fire vehicles that could help us to not have to outsource those particular functions. So we're looking to hire this person for January 1, which is why you see that that dollar amount in there is a 6-month position for this year.
The only thing I mentioned is that it's going to be funded through
Oh,
ambulance receipts.
thank you. Yes, good point, Chief. So Article 15 shows you that this position would be funded through ambulance receipts. So there's no tax levy dollars that would have to go into this. This would come from ambulance reserve account. And it makes sense because this person would be dedicated to fire apparatus. So before I take any questions, does anyone want to add anything? Okay, yes.
Good evening. Can you come up to the podium? Good evening, Danny Largis, Precinct 4. Is this mechanic going to be on call for the fire department with a vehicle to go out and hopefully not happen, but remove a fire personnel vehicle off the road, an engine, an ambulance? I have heard of them breaking down on the way to calls. Is this person going to have this vehicle 24 hours a day, so if they need him, he can get there right away?
So the way that it's established now is the DPW Fleet Maintenance Division has a mobile fleet truck. So this is something that we're doing very similar now. If there's a breakdown where we need a mechanic off hours, they come in, they go to the DPW garage, they get the fleet truck, and they come out. So mobile fleet is something that we sort of already have now.
So they are on call 24?
Yeah, so the DPW
24/7?
mechanics are now, yes. There's been many occasions where they've been called out after hours, weekends, so that's something that occurs now.
And all the fire department certifications for repairs, he'll have all of that, and are we looking to train this individual or hire somebody that already has all these certifications?
Well, I think that there's a push, in the DPW altogether, but certainly with this position it's what's called EVT, it's Emergency Vehicle Technician. For those in the room that may be familiar with ASE, that's typically the certification that mechanics would have at dealerships and those kind of things. They're the sort of the certifying body. We will select certain EVT tracks that make sense for our operation, because there's many EVT tracks that really have nothing to do with our operation. So we'll select the EVT tracks that make sense for the town and our operation, and we will require the mechanic to get and possess those EVT certifications to work on the fire rescue fleet.
So you're looking to train them, chief?
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to jump in here, too. This position is a DPW position. It falls under DPW, but because it's a unique position where it's dedicated for fire apparatus, there's a shared oversight of this position, because obviously DPW is going to need input from fire chief on what types of certifications are needed, what types of work needs to be done. DPW needs to have oversight of the employee because they're in the building, and they need to have scheduling of the bay apparatus and the other equipment so that we can keep up with our other vehicles as well. So this, similar to a couple of other positions here in town, is a position that would be overseen by both the fire chief and the DPW director.
So if it's a minor repair, they're going to just send them out to either Station 1 or Station 2 to do the repair right there, correct? Instead of downing the truck and...
Yeah, I think that's how we all envision it. I mean, we know that there are space issues, at the DPW. It's a very cramped spot. So we've said from the beginning that, probably 70% of the work that the fleet mechanic can do, and that really happens today. I mean, not every repair today is made at the DPW. Sometimes they come, depending on the repair, and they'll fix it right in the bay or at the station that the truck is in. So I think we all agree that we want to try to continue that as much as possible because they're tight for space. We want to try to have as many repairs and preventative maintenance as we can at the fire station versus moving it to the DPW for that work to be done.
All right. Thank you.
Welcome.
Doreen? Hi.
Doreen Goodrich, Precinct 3. Couple quick questions. One, I imagine that will be asked on town meeting floor since everyone already got the warrant articles. Why the reduction from 150 to 115? And the second question is, if there's any additional money budgeted to train additional mechanics. I know the chief said that you hope to hire a firefighter mechanic, but I'm a firm believer in cross-training, and if we have the availability to train additional mechanics in the emergency vehicle training, I would fully support that.
Thank you. So with regard to training, we always invest in our employees, and we're always interested in getting them the training they need. In this particular case, they will need specific training that I'm assuming will be able to come out of the ambulance receipts to a point. I want to go back to this 150. So the one, originally it was 150, it's been reduced to 115. That was more of an oversight on our part, where we had already in Article 2 put in for the position for the 6 months at $36,000, and it was duplicated in Article 15. The 36 was added in there. The 115 was actually what we needed for the equipment. So that was the duplication. Anyone else? All right, so thank you. If you do have any questions on this particular item, feel free to reach out to Joanna, Nick, the chief, and deputy chief. We've all been discussing it. We do have a plan on how this is going to work. Implementation, we're hoping to get this by January 1st. We think it's important. We have a little legwork to get that done and get our job descriptions and things like that. So we're waiting to see, hopefully this will pass on October 18th, and then it's full steam ahead on our end to get this position up and running and get them into DPW. So, thank you. Let's see. Why don't we do it this way? Adam, can I just turn to you real quick to just explain the zoning article and why we need to do this?
Sure. So as Julie indicated earlier, this is kind of being handed down by the state. Last year, there was the Economic Development Bill was passed. In that bill, it named Auburn, along with several dozen other communities, and it's an MBTA community. So it is, what this means is the state, in order for Auburn to remain eligible for certain grant programs, we have to allow apartments by right. And this zoning bylaw proposal would make apartments by right in 3 districts, the RA, RB, and LB districts. These are districts that are already fairly well-developed, already pretty well-settled. Some already have apartment buildings in them. So it was thought that it would make sense to keep these types of possible developments in this area. The 3 grant programs that would not be eligible for if we didn't do this include MassWorks, the Local Capital Projects Fund, and the Housing Choice Initiative. These are pretty substantial grant programs. We've gotten in the past hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially from MassWorks. So the town would be hurt if we couldn't go after these types of funds in the future. So this is why it's coming before you in a couple of weeks. So if you have questions, let me know.
Thank you. So again, this is a requirement of the MBTA communities in the Commonwealth, and it's not a drastic change from
No.
what we have now. It's just changes something from a special permit to a by right.
Currently, those 3 districts, apartments are allowed with a special permit. This just cuts out the special permit requirement and makes it a site plan approval.
So that is our only zoning article on this time. You'll probably all be happy to hear we have one. And there aren't a lot of warrant articles on here this time, but before we entertain any of the questions, I just thought it would be a good opportunity to have Ed Kazanovich, the Assistant Town Manager and CFO, explain to you overall what it is we're seeking on some of these financial items and what impact that has on our budget.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Julie. Excuse me. So as the warrant has been prepared and requested before you for consideration and questions tonight, the total ask between Articles 2 through Article 22 is $2,063,000. That sounds like a big number, but please keep in mind that 1.2 of that is being asked from free cash and overlay surplus. So when you look at the net of the appropriation or amendments that's being requested, when you back out available funds, which are ambulance receipts, free cash, overlay surplus, perpetual care, the net impact on the tax levy is about $690,000, maybe less than that. How that equates to Prop 2.5, I want to tell you that going into the fall town meeting, we'd be taxing it at a level of 1.69 out of 2.5. So once again, we're not taxing the 2.5. That's a utilization of 67.61% of Prop 2.5. That means we're going to add about $500,000 to our excess levy, which means those are dollars we're not taxing under Prop 2.5. So basically, that's a summary of the request. I'd be happy to answer any questions relative to any warrant article that appears on the warrant before you tonight.
Any questions? Any questions for any of the departments that are here? Yes.
Hi, Sarah Libby, Precinct 5. I have a question for the police officers. Regarding Articles 12 and 13, what is the handgun-mounted optic system, and why does it need over $24,000?
So I have a prepared statement, but I think it's just easy to explain it to you. So the sighting systems that I'm asking to reutilize the money that was in capital improvement that was originally dedicated for office furniture that we haven't expended, we already have these sighting systems that we use, they call reflex sights. I'm sure everybody in this room can understand if an officer is involved in an officer-involved shooting, it's a very stressful event. So they have a lot of information they have to rapidly absorb and make a decision on how they're going to handle the situation. And these reflex sights basically optimize and simplify the sighting picture for the officers so they can, under stressful situations, be very accurate with their firearms. Because obviously, if they have to send a round down range, they want it to hit what it's supposed to hit and not hit what it's not supposed to hit, if that's partially answers your question.
Okay. And the cost of over $24,000?
Sorry?
Sorry, I was just wondering what, if you could explain the cost for, you're asking for over $24,000 for the system?
Yeah, go ahead. Excuse me. So it's around $1,100 per unit because it requires a new firearm. It requires the sight itself, and it requires a new holster. So all told, those three items end up being about $1,100 per officer. So we're not going to initially outfit what would be considered the administrative people. It's going to go to the patrol guys first. And the firearms that are going to be turned in, the current firearms that are going to be replaced, we're going to sell those back to a dealer and use that money towards ammunition, which is kind of deferring some of the cost of the training that's going to occur, because there is a little bit of a training curve with the new optics systems.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing I'd just like to state just to the crowd. This sighting system is definitely going to enhance officer safety, and it's going to enhance public safety.
Any other questions on any of the articles? I don't see any. I think if I can just jump in on one thing. As we always do at every fall meeting, we put money toward stabilization. And pre-COVID, we were putting the operating fund, operating budget, we were putting money toward OPEB. We had to make that change during COVID where we had to reduce the budget by $1 million. We are hoping to get back to putting money through the operating budget into the OPEB fund. Since that time, we've been putting it in through free cash because our free cash policy allows us to spend up to a certain amount of our certified free cash on an annual basis. We don't have to spend that, but we believe that using that to fund a one-time cost per our policy is the best use of those dollars. So once again, you're going to see that we're suggesting to put into the OPEB fund one more time. We were putting a straight $500,000 in on an annual basis. Our OPEB liability right now is probably 29 million?
51 million.
That's 50, I'm sorry.
Went back up.
It went up.
So our OPEB liability, of course, is determined by the rate of return we get on our investment, and that was readjusted, so our OPEB liability went up. So it probably, last I saw, we were funding our liability at about a 12% ratio. We have about $6 million out of $51 million outstanding OPEB liability. Certainly, it's important that we continue to fund that because that may adversely affect our rating with the rating agencies at some point in time. So that's a priority of the town. I also want to tell you that we recently got our certification of free cash, and we had a net gain of about $1.4 million from the prior fiscal year. Our free cash policy allows for 50% use of that net gain, which equates to about $700,000 that we're allowed to appropriate by a vote of town meeting. I can tell you we're not using all of our 50%. We asked for $300,000 as a share to go into our stabilization account, and the Board of Selectmen asked that we consider using a $20,000 request from DPW to replace an air compressor out of free cash. We did change the language in the warrant to reflect that request. So with, out of $740,000, we are using 320. So it does leave a substantial amount of unused free cash under the policy, available for appropriations if so needed for any type of emergency purpose that requires a special town meeting at a later date.
This, 1 point, what did you say it was, out of the 2.5, 1 point?
A net gain of free cash over prior fiscal year,
No, the budget, the,
oh,
What's the level of taxation? Was it
1.69.
okay, and that's on top of what we already approved in May? This is
That's
being
blend-
added
that-
at this,
That's blended. So under Prop 2.5, we're allowed to recognize new growth and add an additional 2.5% of taxation to fund municipal budgets during the course of any fiscal year. We're not taxing to the max. We haven't taxed to the max for the last 12 years. We have not utilized 100% of 2.5, when most communities are charging all of 2.5.
but we're not most communities. I would love to come to town meeting just once and say, hey, guess what? We're not going up at all.
We have.
What,
When
how
I-
long
when I-
ago was that?
When I present the chart, look at the years that show 0.00% utilization.
So we're gonna add this, and then when we go to town meeting again in May, I'm sure there's gonna be some more increases.
This, every year it resets the clock. It doesn't add to this. That's why we have excess levy of $9 million, because we're not taxing to the max.
People cannot afford this in this town. They can't. We're what, 60-something% elderly in this town? We just can't afford to keep raising the taxes. The things that I'm looking at tonight are common sense, yes. The police department needs what they need, the fire department needs what they need. I'm gonna tell you, come May, town meeting, I'm probably going to vote no on the budget. I don't want to see this town taxed and taxed and taxed. This is ridiculous.
So I do want to just comment on that. First of all, we're focused on this town meeting warrant, so I can't tell you what's going to be on the May town meeting warrant. That's premature. I'll also say, I don't see where you'll ever get a budget that doesn't increase, because you have contractual obligations and you have fixed costs that go up every year. And if you want to look at this year alone, our electric costs are $250,000 higher today
Correct.
than they were in May. So there are circumstances that happen every year for every budget.
And
I would
fuel
like
for
to
the,
see one community where the budget will never go up. It can't happen. You have contractual obligations, and you have fixed costs that goes up. Fuel, repairs, supplies, equipment, all those things that we've been doing, and doing this all under the level of Prop 2.5 that we're allowed to tax to, those costs still do go up. So I would tell you that this town does an amazing job with the management of the finances that it has with the increase in costs. We have not come to the voters to use all of 2.5. We have not come to the voters for a Prop 2.5 override. We have no intention of doing that, and we've been able to mitigate all of the increasing costs of our supplies, our materials, our labor, our utilities, and all the other rising costs that every other community faces. And we have not taxed to 2.5, and we have not asked for an override. So we are in one of the better financial shapes of any of the communities in Massachusetts. Our free cash is amongst the top, our excess levy is amongst the top, and the level of our taxation is one of the lowest. So I just want to be able to get the facts out there. I don't want people hearing that we're coming in with unreasonable requests. If there's something specific on here that's unreasonable that town meeting members have a concern about, that's why we're here. We're here to answer questions about specific items that we do have to increase. But to just make an overall statement that we can't afford this. Costs are going to go up. It's our job to mitigate those costs the best we can. I think we've done a good job. I think our department heads do an excellent job at that. We're not coming before the voters, and we're not coming to town meeting members to ask for items that are unreasonable. That's why we're all here. Transparency, we want to show you what we're asking for, and we want to explain why we're asking it and why we need it. If we don't need it, we're not going to ask for it.
I think we need to focus on getting more businesses in town. Look at the mall, it's a ghost town. All these businesses are closing, there's our tax revenues right there. If we had more businesses, we could generate more taxes and wouldn't have to raise taxes for the residents. Am I
Again,
wrong?
I don't want to get into a discussion that has nothing to really do with the warrant articles.
Well,
That's a conversation
It
about
kind of does, because we're
generic
upping
economic development.
the taxes, 1-point-something%.
Well, a discussion for another day, but that's a conversation that needs to be held when tax classification comes around. Because we are one of few communities that has a dual tax rate. And the tax rate differential between the residential and the commercial, it's a question every year. There is a large difference between it. The board has done a great effort over the last 10, 15 years to reduce that differential that makes the town more attractive to businesses. Now, I also want to be clear, no one should be looking at today's economic development base versus pre-COVID economic development base. The economy is still recovering from COVID. There were long-term effects of the pandemic that the business community felt. Thankfully for us here in Auburn, we didn't see a huge impact, but I would tell you that the business community felt a huge impact, especially if you look at our restaurants and our hotels, which make up a good portion of our economic development base. When things shut down for a period of time, people were not going to the restaurants, they were not going to hotels. Business travel came to a halt. Business travel still has not picked up. A lot of it is remote. So you are going to see some impacts on the business community. You're going to see a different landscape down the road of anyone's economic development base. A lot of office space is no longer needed. Companies have switched from in-person to remote, so they're downsizing their office space. So you are going to see some changes like that. So what we are trying to do, and I think the town's done a good job, is make investments in things that make the town attractive to businesses. Look at Auburn Street, look at the reconstruction, look at our road work, look at Drury Square, look at what we're doing to Goddard Park and the library and the pedestrian activity in that area. We have a plan in place for the Route 1220 area called Rapid Recovery Plan. So we recognize that you have to always be looking ahead. You can't just look at today. You have to be looking ahead, and we're making plans to address those issues so we do keep a strong economic development. But again, I wanted to answer your question, Dan, but I want to focus this back on warrant articles. If there are questions here on the warrant articles, that's what we're here for. We want you to be able to make informed decisions when you go before town meeting on the 18th. So any questions can be asked tonight. If you get home and you say, geez, I thought of a question, I should have asked it, don't hesitate to call us. That's what we're here for. You can come in and meet with us. The school department's always willing. We're there to answer questions. We want you to be comfortable and informed with the decisions that you have to make. That's why we have these meetings.
Thank you.
So I just want to follow up on Mr. Largess's comment. So, first of all, I fully support funding our police, our fire, our schools, and appreciate the fact that we haven't gone to 2.5 doing that. But I don't expect you to have an answer tonight, but if you were to take out the police budget, the fire budget, the school budget, and on the municipal side, employee benefits of that, just how much of that budget is the municipal side operating under? Because I think it's a much lower figure than people recognize. If you take the school budget and then take out employee benefits, and again, the chiefs know I fully support their budgets, but I think that people would be surprised how small the municipal budget is out of the big operating budget, and I think that number would be helpful to have.
Thank you. That's a great point. Obviously, we don't have that number now, but about a year ago, we had done an analysis of what would the tax rate be in Auburn if We had not, and saying that this was something we should do, first of all, we've invested in our schools, we've invested in purchase of open space, we've made targeted, specific investments in this community to make it a better community, to enhance the quality of life for our residents. If you remove the items that were through a debt exclusion, the tax rate would go down significantly. That being said, I think Auburn residents are proud of the fact that we have an excellent school system, that we have great buildings for our children to be in, that we have open space, that we've made targeted investments to keep certain areas as open space, that we've made investments in our roads. DPW has a model road reconstruction project. We were asked to speak at the state several years ago because of our road reconstruction project. Town of Auburn puts more money into the road reconstruction project over and above what the state gives than almost any other community. We have a 20-year roadway improvement plan that is used as a model by other communities. So we are making those targeted, specific investments, and there is a cost to that, but I don't think the people of this community want to see a reduction in our roads, to see a reduction in the quality of the schools. Those are things that we want to spend our money on. That's what the community has indicated they feel is a priority. As you said, police, fire, DPW, schools. These are a major part of having a quality community to live in, and you have to make those investments. I think our job is to make sure that the investments that we make and the recommendations that we make for the use of our money is reasonable, it's well thought out, it's well researched, and we only come to you when we need to have that investment. I also want to point out the grantsmanship in this community. We track our grants. We've applied for probably, I haven't looked at the chart for maybe a month or so, but we've applied for about 400 grants, say, over the term. We've received about $14 million in grants over the last 12 years. That's $14 million that funds programs, equipment, items, in certain cases staffing. It's grants are less available for staffing. But those are all grants that offset the need to come to the taxpayers for dollars. If we were not seeking out these grants, that's dollars that we would have to be coming to the community and asking for. So we are offsetting the money we get from the state, we're offsetting our tax levy, we are doing everything we can to bring in outside revenue sources wherever we can, so that we're not always having to go and tax on it. But when we do, we want to assure you that we've looked at the issue, we've researched the issue, and we believe that it's the most prudent use of our tax dollars.
If I may, Ms. Goodrich, just doing some rough math, and you raise a good point here. When you look at school, at about 28 million, and if I use FY '22 values, because this is an amended budget for FY '23, you look at employee benefits of about 12 million, which includes retirement, it includes health insurance costs, it includes unemployment comp, Medicare for the wages that we pay. You look at public safety between police and fire, you got to subtract out debt and interest for the costs associated with projects that the voters in this community approved. Those are two large ones. You look at Bay Path, you're probably looking at 60 to 62 when you do the rough math out of a budget of 74, which means that leaves local government outside of those areas at a combined budget of about $12 million. And a good chunk of that is in highway for roadway reconstruction, it's for drainage, it's for snow and ice. And when you subtract all that out, there's not much in terms of any discretionary funds in those remaining departments. So I'm hoping, I mean, I can trim that down even further, but that's just to give you a ballpark of what is remaining.
I also think if anyone's interested, just in the future, just getting, if you want more information, you know, we're always happy to share this, but every year in November, the Board of Selectmen takes up tax classification, and the Assessor's Office prepares a nice report on the tax rate here versus tax rates in other communities, on the comparables, on valuations, and usually has some examples showing, say, the exact same 4-bedroom, 2-bath home here in Auburn, what that taxpayer pays versus that same 4-bedroom, two-bath home in Shrewsbury. So we do that, we prepare that information. Tax classification this year is November 18th? 14th? Second week in November, since we're not getting the date, but the Board of Selectmen looks at all of that every
14th.
year. The 14th, thank you. Tax classification this year is going to be November 14th, so it's after town meeting. But it is interesting, that information's always available, and if you want it beforehand, we're always happy to share that, too. Steve?
So you mentioned 51 million in the OPEB liability aspect, and we have 6 million funded. So when that gap increases, what number are we looking at? Like, where are they going to downgrade the town, I guess, as far as, the ratings? And is that gap fluid? Like, I assume there's some things beyond our control, but I also assume that it's growing as people continue to add in years and all that stuff. So how are we going to close that gap if we're funding 500,000?
Great questions. I can tell you that we have a AA+ rating from Moody's, and I think we were able to get to that rating because of the position that we took with our financial policies and our long-term goals and in addressing our long-term liabilities. There is no standard set by the rating agencies as to what that ratio should be. I think the message that we sent to the rating agencies is that we are addressing it on an annual basis. We continue to contribute to our OPEB liability. Above and beyond that, we negotiated language in our contracts that allow for employee contribution to our OPEB. It's their liability. It's their liability, it's the town's liability. It's our long-term health insurance cost that's done on an actuarial basis for each and every employee based upon their age and their life expectancy. And they calculate out what that liability is going to be for employee X, and it's an assembling of all of these liabilities that lead to that 51 million. In addition to that, based upon our level of contribution, they're also figuring out on the revenue side what our return on investment is going to be based upon our level of annual contribution and what our rate of return is on that contribution, in addition to the employee contribution. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. As it stands now, that liability does not adversely affect the opinion on our financial statements, although there's been some discussion that it may in future years if a community does not address their liability. So, because Auburn is 51 million, they're not saying you have to appropriate X on an annual basis. They just want to see a level of an appropriation or an effort to at least address it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I just have to say, while we're here, I want to thank all the department heads and just say, maybe I'm biased when I say this, but I think the town of Auburn has the best town administration, the best departments. I think the fire, police, public services, Department of Public Works, Board of Health, the services that we're providing this community, I stand by it. I'm proud of it. I think we have a level of excellence that a lot of communities would like to have, and many communities do have, but I'm proud of what we have here in Auburn. I think we have a great team, first of all, the management team, but I think right down to all the employees. Everybody's dedicated to the town of Auburn. We're focused on getting the job done. We want to do the best we can with the dollars and the resources that are appropriated to us from town meeting. We appreciate your support, and it gives us the opportunity to continue to implement the programs, the procedures, the services, and the personnel that we need to keep this community moving forward in a positive manner, which it has, and it should continue to do that, given the resources that we have and the staff we have. So I want to thank everybody. I know we have a lot of new people on all ends. We have some of us who have been here longer, but as a team, we work really well together. We share resources whenever we can. We share equipment. This was all done back in 2011 with the reorganization plan, making sure that we don't work in a silo, that if there's an opportunity to share personnel, to share equipment, to share vehicles, we do that. So we are doing everything we can. I want to assure you, we always are doing everything we can to look for efficiencies while still providing a quality level of services to the community. If we make cuts in certain things, it will cut the ability of us to service the community well. So I just want to assure you, when we're coming before you, asking you for something, it's because we've exhausted all other mechanisms available to us for that funding, including grant funding. But we're also very proud of our grant funding track record. We continue to look for grants. Grants are competitive. It's hard to get grants, but we continue to seek to get those grants. And just one last thing in closing. When I first came here back in 2011, at the time, the Board of Selectmen had said they wanted to make economic development a focus. Because, to your point, Dan, you do need the business community. We have to have a strong business community. They are a major part of our tax revenues. We need to have a solid, strong business community. We've done a lot of work in economic development, again, that we're proud of, but it's brought us to a point where, right before COVID, if you had driven down Route 12 in 2011, and you drove down Southwood Street again in 2019, you would see that almost all the buildings were occupied. Now, in 2011, they weren't. There was a lot of vacancy. It's to the point where in economic development, in our economic development efforts, we actually have to turn away some businesses that are seeking to come here because we didn't have the space for them, because the space was already occupied. So yes, right now, I think, pandemic-related, we're going to see some change of lifestyle, change of business style. Like I said, I think you'll see maybe more office space, but people will, we're working to reutilize that office space into different uses. But I think overall, it's important to note that it is important, as you said, Dan, it is important to have the business community here. We have a good relationship with them. We have a business roundtable. We now have an economic development coordinator. That was a recommendation from our economic development strategy study back in 2017. We focus our efforts to provide business assistance, business attraction, retention, and recruitment. So those are the areas that we're focused on for economic development. And again, that will bring in more revenues, and that will enable us to hopefully continue to keep the residential rate stable. Any other questions? First of all, we want to thank you for coming out tonight, and see you again in 3 weeks. Again, any other questions, feel free to call. Feel free to call any of us. Direct the calls through my office if you'd like, and I'll make sure I get the answers to you and get them back to you. I can reach out to the appropriate people and make sure you have the information that you need. And if you know any other town meeting members that have questions or may want to get more information, again, please point them to the town's website, and they'll be able to see this whole meeting online. So, thank you. Anyone else? All right. Thanks, I guess that's it. Chris, I think we're done, if you want to wrap. All right, thank you. Thank you.